UFC 273, Volkanovski versus the Korean Zombie takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card, starting with the early prelim opener of Julio Arce versus Daniel Santos. I am going to be going with Julio Arce here in the opening fight of the card. Daniel Santos is a good prospect, however, he's nothing too special to watch out for in my opinion. He's a young guy, he's got a lot of momentum right now as well, he's on a win streak, coming into the UFC. I think he has drawn a little bit of a short straw here against Julio Arce. Julio Arce, fair enough, he can't beat Song Yadong. Not many people can beat Song Yadong. He's a very great fighter. So to draw this card as your debut fight is a little bit worrying for me for Daniel Santos. I'd like for him to get a little bit of an opener in the UFC against a lower ranked guy than Julio Arce. I think Julio Arce is quite a high level unranked bantamweight right now. Of course, used to be a featherweight, has some very good wins in his career there. I think he's a very good fighter. 17-5 is a good record when a lot of that has been done in the UFC. So I think he's going to come out there and beat Daniel Santos by decision, 29-28. I think Daniel Santos might start looking very good in the first round. Octagon, nerves, maybe he's going to be real fast, twitchy in that first round, looking for a finish, looking to get things over and done with. And I think the veteranship and the experience of Julio Arce is going to start to kick in as the fight goes on, and I think he's going to win the second and third round. Losing to Song Yadong in the second round is not so bad in hindsight when you watch what he can do to other people in that division. So I think I'm going to go with Julio Arce here. He's no slouch. He's a very good fighter. He's very, very experienced as well. And I think that's going to come into effect here against Daniel Santos. And I've watched some of Daniel Santos' fights. He has got some good wins over some decent names on the regional scene. I just don't see maybe if this was just a regular debut fight for him, I would pick him, but I don't see a guy who's going to come in there and just beat Julio Arce. I don't see him finishing Julio Arce, so if this does go to a decision, I can definitely see Julio Arce getting this one done. Not to mention, Julio Arce has come back to bantamweight now for quite a while, so he's going to be more adjusted to the weight class. I know he is coming off a KO loss. It wasn't too brutal of a KO. It was a TKO loss for him. I am going to be going with him over Daniel Santos here by decision, 29-28. Moving on up the card, Piera Rodriguez versus Kay Hansen. I'm going to go with Kay Hansen by decision, and I'm going to call a split decision win for Kay Hansen here. I think she's going to out-volume Piera Rodriguez. I've watched Piera Rodriguez's Contender Series fight. Looked good on the Contender Series. Won her fight on the Contender Series against a good opponent. But I think Kay Hansen's a lot more experienced. I think she's also very good because, in my opinion, Jasmine Jasudavicius should never have been the underdog against Kay Hansen. She was a big underdog. I picked her as an underdog, and she got the job done. But I think that Jasmine Jasudavicius is a very, very good women's fighter. I watched Piera Rodriguez's Contender Series fight, and she looked good, but the output was quite low. It wasn't anything too impressive. Like, let's be real, if it was a man who had the same performance on the Contender Series, they would not be getting a contract. However, there are basically no women's talented fighters coming in, so she's undefeated. She gets a contract on the Contender Series simply by way of winning the Contender Series bout. Kay Hansen won the third round against Jasmine Jasudavicius. Did very well in that third round, got going as the fight went on, and she's being extremely active here by taking a very, very quick turnaround, so I think that's going to benefit her. Here. But Piera Rodriguez hasn't fought since like 6 months ago or something like that, which is an average layoff, but I think the activity of Kay Hansen is going to mean she's going to start a lot faster. She seems to pick up when she goes into fights quite a bit. She did that in the third round against Jinyu Frey. It was like a competitive first 2 rounds. She did it against Corey McKenna as well. I know that Corey McKenna loss doesn't look too good in hindsight because Corey McKenna didn't look too good against Elise Reed, but again, I picked Elise Reed as an underdog there because she's very good. A lot of these women's odds in these bouts are very incorrect in my opinion, and I think putting Kay Hansen as an underdog, I've got to take those underdogs. I think this is a bit of a 50-50. I'm leaning the way of Kay Hansen, and she's an underdog. I know that she's got a worse record, but in women's MMA, often it's about experience because you've never really fought anyone that good until you get to the UFC, and this is the strawweight division. Kay Hansen picks things up as the fight goes on, so I think activity is going to lead for her to start a little bit faster, start in better form, and she's also very, very young at 22 years of age, so she's going to be a sponge for MMA at this point in her career. So I think there's going to be noticeable improvements here for Kay Hansen, and she looks very good, and she brings a high-paced fight as well, which I think that Piera Rodriguez, I don't know if she's going to keep up with, because it was quite a slow-paced fight on the Contender Series. She looks like she does have some power in her hands, so maybe I can see her winning the first round against Kay Hansen, and Hansen making enough exchanges to where Piera Rodriguez is throwing a lot of power shots, landing maybe a lot of power shots without getting a finish, and then Kay Hansen sort of creeping into the fight in the second and third round, and winning this one in a very close split decision, 29-28. Plus, she's a very big name already in her career. Maybe a lot to do with the fact that she has an OnlyFans, but maybe not to do with that. Likely to do with that, let's be real. So if there is going to be a way that the judges sort of lean towards, it's going to be towards Kay Hansen, in my opinion. I'm going to trust her to win a split decision here. Very weird prediction here, but I think I'm quite good at calling some split decisions. I'm going to go with Kay Hansen as the underdog here. Moving on up the card, Anthony Hernandez versus Josh Fremd. I'm going to go with Anthony Hernandez over Josh Fremd. Josh Fremd is a good prospect coming up. He has lost a couple of fights on the regional scene, don't get me wrong, but he is a very good prospect. I've watched his fights on the regional scene. He's had some quite high-profile fights on the regional scene as well. So I've paid attention to them. He looks very good. He's got a lot of skill. He's not blowing my hair off here, like, with this win. Like, it's very interesting to see him come up. I wish he would have got a full camp fight against, again, an approachable debut opponent. Not Anthony Hernandez, who's been around, beat Rodolfo Vieira, wins as the fight goes on. Josh Fremd coming in on short notice here. Is he going to be ready for a 3-rounder in the UFC in his debut? The moment he's been waiting for. Anthony Hernandez is a very young guy as well. So I'm going to go with I'm going to go with Anthony Hernandez here. Josh Fremd is good. I can see him opening the fight quite well and doing quite well at the start of the fight. And then because it's on short notice, I can see him slowing down as the fight goes on. Anthony Hernandez is very difficult to finish. I think Kevin Holland finished him at one point in his career. But other than that, Rodolfo Vieira had him in some very dangerous positions. And Anthony Hernandez showed very good resolve to survive those positions and get back into the fight. I'm going to go with Anthony Hernandez in the late rounds by like third round submission or TKO. Third round finish for Anthony Hernandez. Josh Fremd, maybe I'd edge his direction if he was coming in on a full camp and had some long time to prepare for this fight. But on short notice, I'm going to trust in Anthony Hernandez. He had a tall order in front of him in Dricus du Plessis, so you know he was going into this training camp with everything here because he had a very tough opponent ahead of him. So I think he's going to bring that energy into the fight with Josh Fremd and win this one by third round finish. Moving on up the card, Aleksei Oleinik versus Jared Vanderaa. I'm going to go with Aleksei Oleinik here. Jared Vanderaa is garbage. I have no idea why they keep giving him fights. But they keep giving him fights because he's a heavyweight and it doesn't matter how many times you lose, apparently. Or if you win and your name's Ben Rothwell, they just cut you anyway. So it's a very confusing system of how they cut people from the UFC and keep people in. But Jared Vanderaa stepping in here against Aleksei Oleinik on short notice as well. That's a benefit for Aleksei Oleinik here. He was supposed to be taking on Ilir Latifi. That even got delayed to this card. And Aleksei Oleinik is going to have a very long camp going into this one. He's a very big guy for the heavyweight division as well. I think I noticed that in the weigh-in stare down between him and Ilir Latifi because Latifi was just so much smaller than him and I didn't expect that. Oleinik's a big guy. He can grapple very well. We've seen Jared Vanderaa out-grappled a couple of times in his career. So I'm going to go with Aleksei Oleinik getting this one done by submission in the first round. I think this is going to be relatively easy for him. I think he will get the takedown, pass over into a dominant position and get himself that sub. Maybe by an arm triangle, maybe by a rear naked choke if Vanderaa gives up the back. I just see a first round submission for him. Vandeera's fat, pathetic looking. Not athletic at all. I think I'm in better shape than him. He's a pro fucking athlete. It's a fucking disgrace. If we're being honest, it's a disgrace that these fucking fat cunts keep coming into the UFC. You're a pro athlete. Start fucking acting like it. Don't have tits. You're in the UFC. I'm going with Oleinik. He's in better shape and he's fucking 70 over Jared Vanderaa. It actually angers me. But whatever. I'm going to ease up. Jesus, I lost it there, guys. I'm getting pretty emotional with these predictions here. So maybe take away from this prediction. Don't put your money on Oleinik. Maybe this is all out of emotion here, but fuck, it annoys me. This is supposed to be the premier sports organization for MMA. And we got fucking Jared Vandeera's fucking saggy self. Aleksei Oleinik. He's in shape at 70. Over Jared Vanderaa. And also Vandeera's got a grappling problem in some of his fights. And Oleinik's a great grappler, if not a better grappler than some of the grapplers that Vandeera's had problems against. food chain of grappling, MMA algebra. I'm going with Aleksei Oleinik here by sub, full camp as well. That does benefit him, even if the fight goes into the distance. Moving on up the card, Vinc Pichel versus Mark Madsen. Ugh, let me calm down. Sorry, I just saw Jared Vandera's picture. It pissed me off. I'm going to go Vinc Pichel over Mark Madsen. I ain't impressed by Mark Madsen, man. I ain't even impressed by his grappling, I'll be honest with you. This guy's an Olympian. Enough to put Olympian in his nickname. We ain't seeing high levels of grappling here, and I think that even Vinc Pichel looked better against Austin Hubbard than Mark Madsen did, if you look at both of their fights. Mark Madsen actually, outlanded... Mark Madsen got outlanded in the first round by Austin Hubbard on significant strikes, but won it based on control time on the ground, and he got a lot of takedowns against Austin Hubbard, so they gave him the round because of that, which is understandable because Hubbard didn't do too much damage to him. And then he started to slow down with all of the heavy grappling offensive that he needed. Vinc Pichel does not slow down. He does not slow down. So even in that Mark Madsen-Austin Hubbard fight, Hubbard came back in that third round and started doing very well and started actually piecing up Mark Madsen in that round. Also, he had a very close fight with Clay Guida. I know... Again, shockingly, Clay Guida's still a threat right now at lightweight, so it's not even a bad close win that he got. But that can go Clay Guida's way. I think Vinc Pichel is a step above that. He had a great performance against Jim Miller. He had a great performance in his last fight as well. He beat Austin Hubbard, in my opinion, more convincingly than Mark Madsen. So I can see him being taken down quite a bit, but because of that, I think it benefits him. Funnily enough. I think if he had really good takedown defense, maybe Mark Madsen can, not exert so much energy going for so many takedowns. I think Vinc Pichel will be taken down, but the fact that he can get up so well afterwards, I think it's going to be a curse for Mark Madsen. He's going to get him down so easily, but he has no finishing potential on the ground, in my opinion, against a guy like Vinc Pichel, who's a veteran who's seen it all. So I think it's going to be a curse for him. He's going to have to, his benefit is going to be his poison, in my opinion. It's like a double-edged sword is what I'm looking for here. That's the phrase I'm looking for. Madsen will get him down because he does have better grappling. But I think because of that, he's going to go for a lot of takedowns because Pichel's going to work his way back up to his feet. And Madsen doesn't have the best of control time purely because of the style of grappling that Madsen has. So I think I'm going to go with Vinc Pichel, working his way back up in the first round. Madsen winning the first round, but because he's using so much energy going for so many takedowns that he's like, I'm winning, I'm getting takedowns, he's going to start to slow down as the fight goes on, and Pichel's going to start wearing on him and get a 29-28 decision. Unanimous, I'll go with. Moving on, up the card to the prelims. Mickey Gall versus Mike Malott. I'm going to go with Mike Malott. Mike Malott, I reckon his name actually is pronounced. Yeah. Mickey Gall's good. He has had some performance where you're like, I didn't expect him to beat Jordan Williams, and he goes out there and beats Jordan Williams quite easily, even though Jordan Williams, I believe, beat Gregory Rodriguez. So, yeah, Mickey Gall does shock you sometimes with his performances. He is good. He's got decent hands. He showed good hands in the first round of the Mike Perry fight. Of course, the legendary Mike Perry, GOAT himself of the sport. So that's a pretty good feather in the cap of Mickey Gall to be able to take a round off the legendary Nigerian nightmare Mike Perry. But I am going to go with Mike Malott. He looks great on the Contender Series. Got a nice and easy first round submission. He's been in the game for a very long time. So even though his record is 7-1, he's had a lot of absences, but he's still been training at Team Alpha Male, which is a good gym at this point. I know they got a lot of shtick after the... They had their guys, and then once Cody Garbrandt started to lose, you were like, okay, who does Team Alpha Male really have at this point? But they've started to come up with some new guys coming up, like Mason Jones, and even they've got Song Yadong now coming up in the bantamweight division. So they've pieced together a few more good guys that they have at their gym, and I think I'm going to go with Mike Malott here. He's been around for a lot longer than his record suggests. He's even a veteran of MMA at this point. I think he has the experience level because of how long he's been out of fights training in the gym of a guy who's 14-1 rather than 7-1. So I am going to go with Mike Malott here over Mickey Gall, and I reckon he gets this one done by finish at some point in the first round by submission. I think Mickey Gall's a little bit too sloppy, and that's going to leave the openings for Mike Malott to get the job done. Moving on up the card, Aspen Ladd versus Raquel Pennington. I am going to be going with Raquel Pennington here, getting the job done over Aspen Ladd. Aspen Ladd just doesn't seem like she wants to win fights half of the time. I'll be honest with you, I can't pick her after that last performance that she had where her coach was literally verbally abusing her in her corner, which is absolutely fine because if I was her coach and I was relying on a paycheck for Aspen Ladd to go out and win, I'd be verbally abusing her in that fight because she didn't do anything at all. I can't trust her after that, okay? That's just my opinion. Raquel Pennington pushes the pace at least. She leads the dance, and I think that's enough to trust her to get this one done by decision. 30-27 or something like that over Aspen Ladd. Aspen Ladd doesn't want to be in there, I feel like, half the time. Norma Jamont's good. She's like the best women's featherweight in the world, which isn't saying much. Well, she's not the best women's featherweight, but she's like the number 1 ranked women's featherweight, even though there's only 3 of them. So it's not saying too much. I don't know how she'd fare in the bantamweight division, but I think Aspen Ladd, she always has a tough weight cut. Pennington pushes a pace. Aspen Ladd don't want to do this, I don't feel like. She ain't got that grit. She ain't got the toughness to continue where things get tough. Ever since she got KO'd by Germaine de Randamie, she's had a very different fighting style. She used to be the pressure girl that put it on people and broke them as the fight went on and really grinded them out. And she beat Tonya Evinger by putting a pressure on her and a pace, and she was screaming as she beat her up on the ground. But since she got KO'd, I've noticed a very different style from her. And if she doesn't lead the dance here, Pennington's going to lead the dance. And the majority of times in women's MMA, whoever leads the dance wins. So I'm going to go with Raquel Pennington getting this one done. 30-27. I don't think Aspen Ladd's lesbian. I'm not too sure. I don't think she is. And I think Raquel Pennington is. So that's a huge advantage for her. So I'm going to go with Raquel Pennington here getting this one done by decision. Moving on up the card, Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Marcin Tybura is on the prelims according to the schedule, but I reckon this might be added to the main card at some point if Ian Garry's fight isn't, which we'll get to in a second. But Rozenstruik versus Tybura, I'll do it in this order anyway. I'm going to go with Rozenstruik. I think Tybura is going to be winning the fight until he loses. But I think Rozenstruik's got a little bit too much power for him, and I think Tybura does get hit quite a bit. And his style of fighting kind of requires him to get hit in certain moments. He's pressuring forward. He needs to pressure forward in order to be successful. He can play that striking game at range, but I think if he does do that, he will get out kickboxed by Jairzinho Rozenstruik. So he's going to try and smother Rozenstruik against the cage, in my opinion, which maybe he can do. But Rozenstruik showed good grappling defense against Curtis Blaydes. He didn't get held down too much. He worked his way back up when he needed to if he did get taken down. He didn't allow himself to get smothered too much either. It wasn't the most entertaining fight, don't get me wrong, but I am going to go with Rozenstruik here. His grappling defense has improved. I think that's going to give him a bit more confidence to throw shots on the feet where he needs to. And I think Tybura is going to be winning the fight. Win the first round in a very close round where he's pushing him up against a cage, kneeing him in the fire, punching to the body, kneeing to the body and stuff like that. And I think in the second round, he's going to try and do the same thing. And I think Rozenstruik's going to like frame off of his face, land an elbow, rock him a little bit, and then finish him off afterwards. So I think I'm going to go with Tybura winning the whole fight in a very competitive fight where he's like pushing him against a cage, and then Rozenstruik getting a KO out of nowhere in the second round and finishing him off because I think there's just a bit too much of a power difference. And I've seen Tybura KO'd a couple of times in his career already, so I'm going to go with Rozenstruik. He's bigger than people give him credit for. I know there's always a joke like he isn't 6'4", but he is a big guy for heavyweight. He's got a lot of mass on him. He's a very tanky, he's like a DC-ish kind of strength of guy, you know what I mean? He's got that weird fat guy strength that some people have where you can like muscle people around quite well. So I think he's going to benefit here, and I think he's going to get a KO in the second round against Tybura. Moving on up the card, Ian Garry versus Darian Weeks. Gonna go with Ian Garry. He looked a little bit jittery in his debut, which is a bit worrying, but if you watch his regional fights, I know not a lot of people like to go to regional fights to see how good someone is because, you know, we never know how good they are until they get to the UFC. But Rostam Akman went to a decision, I believe, with Jake Matthews at welterweight. And Ian Garry fucking embarrasses him. Like, Jack Grant, not many people know that name at Cage Warriors. He's a tough veteran that gives people a lot of problems in a lot of ways. Like, he pressured him for 5 fucking rounds, stood in his face, wanted to trade with him. And Ian Garry looked like a wizard in that fight. Like, he's a very, very good fighter from the regional scene. He has great performances there. I think his debut, I mean, we're criticizing him. He got a first round KO. It's weird to criticize someone who gets a first round KO in his debut, but he did look a little bit shaky in the early going of that fight against Jordan Williams. But you saw, once he sort of eased into it, and found his rhythm, and stopped thinking about it being his UFC debut and everything's on the line, he really looked good. There's like a noticeable shift in the second half of that first round, where he's looking really good. He's landing a head kick as as Williams comes in. He's shifting back. I think he landed that shift back right hand at one point early on in that fight in the second half of the first round. Then he found it again towards the end of the round as well. Ian Garry's very good, and I think if he doesn't have that jittery moment in the first round, he's going to be very good here against Darian Weeks. Darian Weeks is also a very good fighter. Looked good against Bryan Barberena. I believe that fight was on a week's notice as well. No pun intended. His surname's fucking Weeks, but I think if Darian Weeks, I don't think he wins. I don't think he wins this one. I think if he had some KO power early on, like if this was like a surging contender who had like vicious first round KOs, I'd be maybe considering an upset here against Ian Garry. He doesn't have crazy knockout power. He's not putting people out cold badly. Bryan Barberena gave him a few problems in that fight. He showed good cardio and he showed good toughness as well. So I do see this going to a decision, but Ian Garry likes that forward pressure style, and I'll say this about Darian Weeks' style. It's very simple. Like, he does things very normally. I wanted someone a bit more unorthodox for Ian Garry. Like an unorthodox guy who has power in the first round. That guy would give Ian Garry some problems, in my opinion. You give him a simple guy who's going to come forward in a Thai style and plod forward, doesn't grapple too well either. And even then, Ian Garry's got a great judo background and great grappling defense in his career. I think Darian Weeks is a little bit too simple. Nothing special about him. And I can see Ian Garry just sort of tuning him up for 3 rounds and looking like a bit of a wizard out there for 3 rounds. So I'm going to go with like a 30-26 unanimous decision for Ian Garry. Close first round. He pulls ahead a little bit more in the second. And he really starts beating up Darian Weeks in the third. But Darian Weeks is tough, so he's going to last into the third round, in my opinion. If we're looking for Ian Garry to look great here, he's got to get a finish. I don't see that happening. But I think Ian Garry gets this one done by decision. This plays into his game. Someone pressuring forward, him picking him apart at range. Look at his fights at Cage Warriors. The best performances he's had are where people are just sort of walking into him, trying to pressure him, and he's just picking them apart. I reckon he gets this one against Darian Weeks. And plus, he's got a 2.5-inch reach advantage as well. And he's 6'2". And also, he's at Sanford. So he's going to be making rapid improvements here. And he's going to be in Gilbert Burns' training camp for the fight on the main card, which we'll get to in a second. So I'm going to go with Ian Garry by decision. Moving on up the card. Mackenzie Dern versus Tecia Torres on the main card. I'm going to go with Tecia Torres over Mackenzie Dern. I believe, and let me check right now the odds of this. She's a evens odds against her. Just checking for the odds right now. Give me a second here. She's an underdog. Evens, but an underdog. Wow. I'm taking Tecia Torres. I didn't think she'd become an underdog. I thought it would be like they were both evens at one point. So I got to go underdog here with Tecia Torres, I think. I don't see her getting subbed by Mackenzie Dern. I don't see her getting taken down either. She's got great wrestling, really good wrestling, and she's also very small. And in other divisions, being smaller for people, like in men's divisions at the heavier end, being small for the division is a disadvantage. But in women's MMA, when you're both so light, I think Tecia Torres being small is going to be an advantage here. She's going to be a lot harder to get a hold of, a lot harder to keep down because she can pop right back up with like very good speed and stuff like that. And I don't see Mackenzie Dern tying her up in a sub or anything like that on the ground. I can see Tecia Torres, because of how small she is and how fast she is and how strong she is for her size as well, giving some really good scrambles if it does hit the ground and avoiding a lot of those submission attempts. I think she's got a better ground game than Marina Rodriguez, and Marina Rodriguez was able to survive those positions against Mackenzie Dern. And Mackenzie Dern throws punches like a spastic. So I am going to go with Tecia Torres here, piecing her up on the feet. I'll actually go with a Tecia Torres. Ooh, what am I going to call? I'm going to say like a corner stoppage, round 2, at the end of round 2, leading into round 3. I think first round's going to be competitive. Tecia Torres landing a bunch of good shots on Mackenzie Dern. Second round, I think Torres is going to beat the shit out of Mackenzie Dern, stuffing the takedowns and just piecing her up on the feet over and over again. Dern's got a swollen eye. And I think her coach is going to be like, it's not worth it. We're not going to let you take the third round of damage. And I'll say like a corner stoppage, end of the second round for Tecia Torres here. TKO. I reckon she gets this one done. Stand up. Another level to Mackenzie Dern. Dern has no idea what she's doing on the feet. She admitted openly to only starting to hard spar in the build-up to her Virna Jandiroba fight. You know, I'm going to reserve some opinions about women's MMA here, but that's very telling. Only just starting to hard spar once you hit the top 10 of your division in the world. Gonna really reserve my opinions because I want to be monetized. So I'm gonna go with Tecia Torres here, getting the job done. Both really good though. I'm going with Tecia Torres, getting this one done by, corner stoppage or something like that in the second round. Moving on. Up the card, Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat Chimaev. I'm going with Khamzat Chimaev. I gotta go Khamzat Chimaev. I've seen a lot of people talking about stuff like, hey, don't sleep on Burns' jiu-jitsu. I will. I'll sleep on it. And I dare him to sub Chimaev in the first round or the second round or the third. Maybe there's a chance that as Chimaev goes later into the fight, Gilbert Burns can get a sub or a finish or something like that. And I think the early going of this fight leads Burns' best chances to be like a KO on Khamzat Chimaev. We've never really seen him hit on the chin. And not only have we not really seen him hit on the chin too much, he hasn't been hit on the chin too much. And often when you haven't been hit, it's more shocking when you are hit. So that can lead to a more likely chance of being KO'd. Even if he does have a good chin, the fact that he hasn't tasted big shots yet in his career means that when he does taste big shots, they're likely to be more shocking to him, which can lead to more KOs, which I believe I just repeated myself twice there for no reason. But I think I'm going to go with Khamzat Chimaev, first round, TKO with a back mount. I think Burns is going to be so focused on not getting subbed on the ground, and I think it's going to lead to him taking too many unanswered shots from Khamzat Chimaev. So I see Khamzat Chimaev going out there, giving Burns some heat on the feet early on with like a kick to the arms, a big front kick to the body, a big right hand. Burns tries to throw back. Chimaev ducks under, gets the body lock, takes the backside from it, picks him up, dunks him, lands on the ground, puts one hook in, lands a couple of shots. Burns tries to Granby roll. Chimaev takes the back, ends up on top. Burns maybe gets mounted with his facing Chimaev. He turns over, rolls over to try and give his back and create some kind of scramble. Chimaev starts landing some shots to the back of his head around the behind the ear area. Not illegal shots, legal shots. I think he's going to be landing behind the ear of Gilbert Burns. And I think Gilbert Burns is going to be so focused on not giving up his neck. Maybe Chimaev will go for a rear naked choke or something like that, and Burns will defend it and fight the hands. But I think this is going to lead to Chimaev getting too much dominant position time. And he has power, man. So I think if he does start landing some ground and pound, I can see Burns just not really being able to escape the position that he's in, and I can see Chimaev getting a first round TKO with a back mount. That's how I see this fight going. And people, again, don't sleep on Burns' jiu-jitsu, man. Who has he submitted, please? I beg of you. I beg of you. Name Mike Davis. I beg of you, name Mike Davis. Who has Burns subbed? ADCC, this competition, this Nerd Invitational Jiu-Jitsu competition, Weeaboo fucking International Jiu-Jitsu competition. Nerds! It's nerdy sport. Jiu-Jitsu means nothing in my opinion. I love Jiu-Jitsu. It's an amazing art of MMA, and there's going to be some Jiu-Jitsu dweebs in the comments saying it's great, it's really good, it works, and stuff like that, but strength, size, raw ability, okay? Aggressiveness, savagery, I think is what's going to overcome jiu-jitsu and the intricacy of half guard and stuff like that. Like, I don't care. Gilbert Burns has not sabbed anyone at welterweight. I don't see the first one being Khamzat Chimaev. Also, here's another big thing that you have to worry about. Don't sleep on Gilbert Burns and stuff like that. Gilbert Burns is not like a stone cold killer. I wanted him to be that. If he was that, he would have maybe beat Usman. You know what I mean? But he laid on his back after rocking Usman for 2 minutes. These decision-making moments really worry me for Gilbert Burns, if I'm honest with you. He rocks Usman badly, lays on his back for 2 minutes, letting Usman recover and chew up his legs. And then when he gets back up, his legs are destroyed and he gets finished by a jab. Chin is not the best. He's had a TKO loss now recently in his career. He's been KO'd before, so I don't think he's going to have ultimate confidence in his chin leading into this one. And again, as I said, he's not cold as ice. He's not a stone cold killer like Chimaev is. At the start of this fight, I bet you Chimaev's going to be pacing around. Can't wait for it. Undefeated. All the confidence in the world. Massive for the division. He thinks he's a god. And that's going to benefit him. Delusion is the most powerful thing in MMA. Okay? People call people delusional until they become a world champion. Then they're not so delusional anymore. Every world champion seems delusional at one point in their career. It's so powerful to have that kind of confidence. I think Chimaev's going to be wading back and forth in his corner. Woo! You know, making noises and stuff. Building himself up for the fight. Really excited. And I think Burns is going to be... You know, like really jittery in there. We saw against Usman, he looked like he was going to cry in the stare down. If I'm looking for a guy to like take advantage of a big fight where all the eyes are on and it's a really dangerous contender, it's not Gilbert Burns. You know, he looked like he was out of it before the Usman fight. Silly decision making within the Usman fight. I think Chimaev's just too big, too strong. And also, Burns is smaller than the Schmo. And Chimaev dwarfs the Schmo. Like, there is a reality that we need to talk about here. Fair play to skill. Fair play to wrestling experience of Khamzat Chimaev. And the hands that he's got and the power that he's got and stuff like that. The guy's a big middleweight. Let's be real. He's a big middleweight. He kills himself to 170. Burns is not a big guy. He's very small. I'm expecting a 10-pound muscle difference of Chimaev, and there's no wasted mass on Chimaev either here, let's be real again. There's no wasted mass on him whatsoever. It's all effective weight that he has on his body. Very big frame as well. I believe he has a reach advantage, 4-inch reach advantage over Gilbert Burns. He throws a lot of straight shots as well, so I think that's going to be beneficial to him. As long as he doesn't trade hooks back and forth with Burns, I see him having a real easy time here by first round finish. TKO with a back mount. I reckon he gets this one done. He's going to have a 10-pound muscle advantage on Burns. You can't beat that, even if it's an even playing field in skill. I don't see that working out for Burns. Respect for taking the fight. No one else did. I really respect Burns for taking the fight. He's a savage. But Chimaev gets this one done. Moving on. Up the card. Aljamain Sterling versus Petr Yan. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I'm going to go with Petr Yan by decision. Razor close. 48-47. I know it's the very hip thing to shit on Aljo right now because of what he did. And I saw Aljo put out a statement of something like, if people really think I faked that knee, like it really did land. Like, we know the knee landed. We know Yan landed an illegal knee. That's not what people were angry about. Stipe got up faster after the Ngannou KO than... No one rolls around on the ground like that, Sterling. I can't see you right now. You know, like Blades got sent to the Shadow Realm against Lewis. He got up quicker than you. A lot of people got up quicker than you. You got up faster after the fucking Marlon Moraes KO where you got put out cold with no problems. It happens every UFC card. Someone gets KO'd brutally, and they're up a minute or two later getting the other guy's hand raised in the ceremony afterwards, standing there like, you know, it was a bad loss. But Aljo's there like, hold me up, coaches, I can't quite stand right now. Like, that's what people were angry about. But let's talk about the matchup. Aljo's really, really good. He's really, really good. And I think he's going to dial it back a bit. And I think he's going to last to a decision here against Petr Yan. And also, Yan dominated the first fight. Yan was destroying him. Yan lost the first round, even though you arguably could give him the first round, in all honesty, because he knocked him down. Either way, that round's a bit of an either way one, in my opinion. Aljo landed way more, and way more significant strikes, but Yan dropped him in the first round, so that is an either way round. Aljo won the second round, and I'll tell you this, the third round's very close. Yan landed more shots and the better shots. Still a very competitive third round, an extremely competitive third round. The fourth round, Yan started to really do well. Really, really do well. But even we saw against Sandhagen, similar situation. Yan did really well in the fourth round against Sandhagen. Fifth round, Yan looked human for the start of that fifth round. Sort of took that round back for himself within the last minute or so. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't really destroy Sandhagen in the fifth after having a great fourth round. I think Yan's good, but the narrative that he was destroying Sterling is incorrect. So I'm going to stick up for Sterling a bit here, and I think he gives it a very good fight, and I think this is like a fight of the year contender. Back and forth. Aljo has his moments early on. Yan has his moments later on. But I think overall, with Aljo's style, he says he's going to grind Yan against a cage. He's not going to do that. He's not, after getting tossed around by Yan in the first fight, he's not going to want to grapple as much as he did in the first fight. I think he's actually going to try and surprise grapple Yan. Like, he's going to be trading on the feet for like 3 rounds, and then at one point in the third, he might actually get the back of Yan, but Yan will fight out of it because he's a stone cold killer from Siberia. Nothing phases him whatsoever, and he's just going to fight hands, like rip off the body lock of Aljo and just fucking end up on top and land some big shots and stuff. Like, Yan is a Terminator. Aljo's a big guy for bantamweight. He's in incredible shape. He's an amazing athlete. Jan's built different though. He's built like a brick shithouse. He's got different kind of strength, different kind of attitude, and I think he's going to beat up Aljo in the later rounds. However, I see Aljo winning the first two here. I really do see Aljo winning the first 2 rounds again. I think Jan's going to edge the third. Maybe he knocks down Aljo, even if Aljo does outland him a little bit, and that's going to give him advantage. Jan wins the 4th, Jan wins the 5th. I'll give a more detailed breakdown in the lead up to this fight and the fight week. But I think Jan's going to get this one done. Plus, in order to beat Jan, in my opinion, Aljo has to keep up the pace that he kept in the first fight in the first 2 rounds. He's not going to do that. He's going to try and be more reserved. And he's going to try and not gas out as much. He's going to try and be way more reserved this fight against Petr Yan. And I think because of that, it's going to give Yan more time to figure out timing. It's going to give him a better chance to make reads because he's not under pressure the entire time, getting volume against him. I've got Yan by decision. 48-47. Some people will argue 49-46 maybe. Clear win to Yan. Very close. Fight of the year contender. Amazing bout between both of them. Aljo gets respect earned for an amazing performance and putting up an amazing fight, but Yan proves he's a different level of savage, winning the last 3 rounds clearly. Moving on, up the card, Alexander Volkanovski versus the Korean Zombie. I'm going to go with Alexander Volkanovski here. The odds are so annoying because it makes me want to pick the Korean Zombie because, like, you should. With those odds, you should put money on Korean Zombie. He's got a solid chance of winning. He does great against shorter opponents. Frankie Edgar, Dennis Bermudez. If you look at a lot of the finishes in his career, they happen a lot against shorter opponents. He fires a lot of shots from the hip, so it's good against shorter opponents because he can meet the target a little bit quicker when they don't expect it and stuff like that. But Volk's different, man. His recovery's different. I see him getting dropped in the first round. Oh, crazy. Korean Zombie gets it. Oh, and Volk's in real danger here. After he gets dropped, like, on his ass for a second and pops back up, you know what I mean? And then I see Volkanovski starting to piece him up. Work on him as the fight goes on. And I actually see a late rounds TKO here for Alexander Volkanovski. He's not much of a finisher, but I think in his last few fights he's tried, well, his last fight against Ortega, he's made a point to try and finish. And I don't think the Korean Zombie's going to survive that if he does go for a finish against him. I know he's the Korean Zombie, but there's only so much you can take when your leg's getting chewed up. And I think that's a big factor in this fight as well. The leg kicks of Alexander Volkanovski. The calf kicks that he's going to be utilizing here. The Korean Zombie is a boxing heavy guy. I don't know what you guys would call it. I don't know what any, like, experienced person would call it in combat sports. Scouting punches, if you know what I mean. You know when you lean forward a little bit over your lead leg, like wanting someone to throw so you can just dip back and throw at them afterwards. Davison Figueiredo does this all the time in his fights. Not so much recently, but in the first fight against Brandon Moreno, he's scouting his chin forward, scouting for punches, dip throw immediately after the guy throws at him. That's what Korean Zombie does quite well. I just think when he does that, Volk chops the calf. And he's going to try and read and lean forward and look for his moment. Volk chops the calf. Volk chops the calf. Not to mention, one thing that the Korean Zombie really hates is when a guy moves around side to side against him and circles him and stuff like that. That gives him a lot of problems. The Korean Zombie is a forward and backwards type of fighter. We saw this against Brian Ortega, who also chewed up his leg and also had moments when he was walking around the side, moving around side to side, circling around the Korean Zombie. The Korean Zombie couldn't really get an adjustment there. Even against Dan Ige, this was a bit of a problem for him, but Dan Ige, of course, isn't at that level. So Korean Zombie was able to adjust and actually use his grappling to get the win. I don't see the Korean Zombie using his grappling against Volk. I don't see him getting a sub. Don't see Volk really out-grappling the Korean Zombie, at least early on. Maybe later on he would. I think Volk's got better cardio, so later on in the grappling, I think Volk will have an advantage here. I can see maybe a Korean Zombie KO, but with Volk's recovery and his defense and his striking accuracy and the way he picks apart fighters, I think as the fight goes on, that chance is lower and lower. Plus, featherweight. If you don't know, there's barely any finishes at featherweight. Think about all of the high-profile fights you've seen between two featherweight contenders. Dan Hooker came down, got finished by Arnold Allen. Yair Rodriguez, Max Holloway. Max Holloway, Calvin Kattar. Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega. Volkanovski versus Max Holloway twice. Max Holloway versus someone else. It will be a decision, most likely. Other than Brian Ortega, where he got finished. That was a corner stoppage. I wouldn't even be surprised if Ortega somehow survived that 5th round, taking another 10-8 round worth of beating. Brian Ortega versus the Korean Zombie, a decision as well. The Korean Zombie versus Dan Ige, another decision. Calvin Kattar versus Giga Chikadze. Even when people are getting the shit beaten out of him at featherweight, there's not a lot of finishes. You got to break someone to get a finish. I don't see the Korean Zombie breaking Volk. I really don't. I can see Volk maybe breaking the Korean Zombie. So I'm going to go Volkanovski. Late 4th round ground and pound TKO. He's chewed up the leg of the Korean Zombie early on. He's landed a lot of shots to the body. He's landed some body kicks and stuff like that. The Korean Zombie's dropped him in the first and had some moments and maybe gone for it a bit but not been able to finish because Volk's too defensively aware, too smart, he moves too well. And I think the Korean Zombie's going to eventually not be able to stand too well, start getting beaten up quite badly. Volk's going to land a big shot and then go into a takedown afterwards. The Korean Zombie gets rocked by the big shot and then taken down, and then Volk's just pouring it on him and finishes him at the end of the 4th round by TKO to ground and pound. Not to mention, Volk's a big guy. The Korean Zombie's actually not that tall for featherweight. 5'7", I believe he is, and Volk's like, what, listed at 5'5". He's 5'6", Volk's listed at 5'5". They're going to be about 2 inches apart in height, I reckon. I know that's not 2 inches what I just read out, but typically the heights are wrong. Volk's a tank of a man in the featherweight division. He's actually quite big, even if he is short. He's got long arms as well. Like, he's not going to give up too much reach here. 1/2 inch to the Korean Zombie, and he's a bit shorter, so it's going to give him a bit of an advantage there. He's got very long arms for his height. I also believe, and I know, they wanted this in March. The reason why it didn't happen in March, Korean Zombie was too injured to fight in March. Volk's been ready to go. Since his Brian Ortega fight, he wanted to fight before the end of the year, after his August or September fight against Brian Ortega. Put me on the December card. Put me on the January card. Put me on the February card with Adesanya. Put me on the March card. He's been eager to go. Like, get me back in there. I'm coming towards the end of my prime. I think he's like, what, 33 years of age? Yep, 33 years of age. He wants to get his legacy done. You know what I mean? He can solidify a bit of a GOAT legacy here at featherweight if he does stay active. And the Korean Zombie hasn't been in there for a while. Hasn't been too active anyway, even before the Dan Ige fight as well. The Dan Ige, Brian Ortega, Max Holloway twice. You know what I mean? It's different levels of wins. And again, the Korean Zombie was not ready to go in March because he was too injured to fight. Offered a title shot in March. No, I'm too injured to fight. He's lucky it got rebooked. They could have maybe gone to another contender. They maybe could have said, oh, actually, Holloway can fight in March. We're going to make that fight instead. Oh, Holloway can fight in April. We'll just rebook it with him. The Korean Zombie, who's worked his whole life for a title shot, turned it down in March because he was too injured. It was almost settled for March. Volkanovski, Korean Zombie. Too injured for March. I think he's like, the only reason he's taken this is because it's a title shot. He might be healthy enough in April. It's a red flag, you know what I mean? Even if you are wanting to pick an underdog, that's a bit of a red flag to me. So I'm going to go with the Korean Zombie. Sorry, I might have just jinxed it there. I'm going to go with Alexander Volkanovski. 4th round ground and pound TKO after getting dropped in the first. And there's a big moment of a scare for the Korean Zombie. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.